Hi, welcome to the XYChromies, Confidently Uncertain, a show where two Army vets turn renewable energy engineers talk veteran issues, science, geopolitics, engineering, history, Oregon history, work-life balance, all kinds of stuff, everything in between. I'm your host, Pearson Guess. I'm joined as always by my co-host, Richard Ellis. How's it going today, Richard?
It's good to see you, Pearson. You know, if a clown walks into a palace, the clown doesn't become a king, the palace becomes a carnival.
Yes, I think you sent me this quote recently, or I've seen this quote. Either way, we're living in the circus, my friend. We're all we're living in the circus. Um, to put this video into some type of time context, it is April 20th, Sunday. It is Easter. If you so subscribe to that religion, I forget about Easter all the time now. It's funny having shed the Christianity quite some time ago. I just forget about this one. So
Well, as a person with a quickly fading mental capacity, I hide my own Easter eggs all year long.
then you're like,
Yeah,
what the heck is this?
if you're not linked to a family system where their faith is important enough to them to really um, put it right out in front of you, yeah, this is a holiday that's super important to some people living in this country, and it turns out today is where we get the alignment of one faith system and that of the other, the those dank nugs faith system that
Wait, which
that
one?
the ganja faith system,
Oh
the
yeah,
the 420 friendly faith
that's
system.
right. That's right. I couldn't hear you over the sound of my highness. No, I did smoke today. But yeah, late. I did. Did I talk about not smoking until after the workday is ended? That I've reduced my smoking. Yes. So, but in honor of 420, I did light up.
Yeah,
So
you got to blaze trees today
that's
and think
right.
about the that he is risen.
I know. The funny thing is, I'm married to a Persian too. They're the ones who painted eggs. Christianity stole that from them. The egg painting. I'm with like the OG egg painters. That was their thing. So, anyways, that's funny.
I think if you interrogate that faith, if you interrogate the faith of the Christians enough, you will discover there are no new ideas.
Yeah,
It is absolutely entirely a amalgam of assimilations.
yeah, yeah. That's true. I mean, even Islam, they came up with some new ideas after the fact, and they were copying from Judaism and Christianity heavily. They were like, huh. Well, yes, but they came up with some of their own new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So Easter. Anyways, um, last time we talked about work life balance. What else do we talk about? I already talked about this offline already, so I feel like I'm like reliving history. But we talked about work life balance. Oh, how Americans get retirement wrong. Like basically living, like working your ass off until you're like hopefully make it to 60, 65. Then you retire when you're like old, you don't have any taste buds, your body is dying literally, and
Mm-hmm.
you hope that you maintain some level of health through that 65-year grind,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't just keel over right then and there. You also hope that like retirement, there's actually a purpose to it. Otherwise, you die almost immediately too, right? Those people who
Right.
love work, they retire, they take like a 3-day vacation, and then they get back and like settle into their life and die. And yeah, that's really sad too.
Well,
So
their primary identity is lost. It's not taken from them, but it's lost in retirement.
Yeah, it's kind of like the people who are married, who have like a very deep connection. Sometimes they die right after each other, even if like
Yeah,
one might have been sickly, but the other one was like seemed very healthy. Just, but
yeah.
then they seemingly die like 3 days apart or something crazy like that.
Mm.
It's kind of a similar phenomenon. There are people who are specifically married to their job, I guess, or their career, right? When their career goes out to pasture, they just soon follow. So, hmm.
Yeah, I'm just considering this deeper idea, this deeper meaning of what it, so I'm blanking on his name. I want to say it was Tim Ferriss, but I'm trying to remember it was is one of these guys. I know I have that's the wrong author. Tim Ferriss wrote a different book, so I'll think of the guy's name here in a second. But he's one of these wrote one of these productivity books. Like how do you
Maximize.
yeah how do you change your behavior? It's the book. I think the title here is Atomic Habits or something like that. I know everybody's yelling at me. Whatever you have to scream at that my voice is coming out of, please continue screaming at it because I'm not going to look it up. The important thing is that I listened to the book. The one thing I took away from it was this idea of um, uh, I, the identity goal. So, am I am I a person that likes the idea of doing all these things and but never can really do them, or is my identity tied to doing these new things that I want to progress into doing? And that's this important idea that comes from that book. What's hilarious is that as much as I like the concept, I have not made that my identity. So there's
Yeah, what it
a meta there's a
I'm
meta
trying.
idea here of the identity of having identity goals.
Yeah, I was like, I think I got lost in that because I was like, well, how do I don't want to tie my, why do I have to tie my identity to every new thing I do? Or,
Right.
you know, tie it to like the one thing, like I don't want to tie it to any of it. It's like, uh, well, that's not true. I mean, we're in America, like work culture, like many other places, that is kind of paramount to who you are a lot of times. Like you spent 4 years at least studying, to get to your career potentially. And then you spend a lot of time in your career. Like, yeah, it starts to become part of your identity for sure. I can see that. I think the thing that I guess keeps it balanced is um, how much time offline you spend like working basically, right? Like where the stuff is still happening. I think that is the important um, distinction for me, at least when I think about my job and then outside of my job. Yeah, I don't find myself thinking about my job too much when I'm not working, when I'm with the kids and all of them. So there might be this nagging sense that I have something to do when I get back, like, um, but I think everyone has that.
All right, I broke down and I did it. So Atomic Habits is written by James Clear.
Okay.
It's a worthwhile read. I talk about books on this forum occasionally. And I said Tim Ferriss. Oh yeah, Tim Ferriss is the 4 hour work week guy.
The
And
4 hour work
there's
week. Yeah. Okay.
there's things to be learned from both of these books. The problem is that they're um I was just to a commentator one time. In this case, it doesn't matter who it was, but they had this real um, they were really irate about this idea that the people who uh, produce and star in and lecture people on fitness are themselves incapable of being unfit. Their physiology just is naturally that way. They're slender. They have some, their fat to muscle ratio is really biased towards muscle. They just can't be a person that is rotund. And so they
Mm-hmm.
put out workout videos and all these things, and this commentator was just furious at them. Well, that's the that's my same impression with these two books that I'm mentioning, which is a 4 hour work week is an a it is a it is a demonstration of privilege, right?
Yeah.
There is you you're already doing a job that doesn't require your physical presence to perform. So first off, privilege, that's huge. There's no such thing as a 4 hour work week carpenter, for example. That doesn't exist.
No.
And there's no 4 hour work week daycare um, person. I'm thinking a childcare specialist. There's no 4 hour work
Yeah.
week working in a factory. So this guy has incredible privilege to be able to even talk about this. Oh well, all you got to do is just automate all your stuff and then show up for a couple hours a week. Come on.
Yeah, it's funny with books like that specifically, or you get this sense for like, and we talked about this recently, is the problem with tech bros and like how
Right.
their smarts is completely overblown.
Mm-hmm.
And much of it is like their ideas apply really well to like the Bay Area specifically, right? Like
Yeah.
DoorDash and Uber and all these places. Well, it's too
Yeah.
expensive to own a car in downtown San Francisco or any of these areas. Like, but man, it'd be great if we could just Uber, and cabs are such a pain in the ass. Wouldn't it be great if we had a cell phone version of it? Great idea
Right.
for the Bay Area and other big cities. Food, right? Oh, you're so busy, with your over productivity and work that you don't have time to be bothered making food. So all these like food delivery services, all of that shit, um, much like that book, the 4 hour work week, it's applied very specifically to like white collar workers, right? And a specific type too, even. I mean, the finance bros could even be like, fuck you, like, because they're expected to be at the office for like 60 hours. That's just like the bare minimum, right? So like like a normal Korean week of work is essentially what a finance bros schedule needs to be.
Yeah.
It's just finance bros bitch about it in the US over here on Reddit and shit and Twitter, and the people in Korea, apparently they don't bitch about it. They're thinking about increasing that work week to 69 hours.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
minimum.
Like I there was a period of time when I in my current career where um, the right blend of things, in particular my mental health, uh, were all sideways enough that I would work 7 days a week most weeks, except when for whatever reason I couldn't work on a Saturdays, but I would go in on a Sunday when no one else was there, and it was my most productive day of the week.
Yeah.
And boy, am I not proud of that. One, two, I I could probably recall examples, although that's not the purpose of our forum today, of things that I produced or built. I mean, literally with my hands during that period of time that we no longer have or use or that we've thrown away. Like I literally myself have thrown away. So whatever productivity I was bringing to my job during that period of time when I was doing these work
Ex-
weeks where I would go into work on Sunday, there's nothing. It all would. It's a vapor. It all
I mean,
dissipated.
in retrospect, you were escaping your home life, of course,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah,
like so, that like it's very crystal clear, and people know. Like, I mean, when what you're saying reminds me of all the guys in the Special Forces training program in the Q
yeah.
course, like when we were in holdover classes, for 6 weeks, 4 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the time period was, and they had special forces guys there to babysit us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their ideas, they had to babysit us, prep us for the next phase. They were there all weekend. Like they would show up all the time, right? Because they would call us in, on Saturday because, well, we're here now and we're bored. And what can we do? Oh, we can F with these guys or whatever.
Right.
So, they did everything in their power to avoid being home, right? Sometimes they'd bring their kids with them, right? That was fine. And you'd have like these, angry alpha male type characters with the most effeminate sons, right? They always, always, oh, and I laugh. It's God's little trick on these guys where they're not home. They're never home, and so their son naturally just grows up being a huge mama's boy. And it's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying the irony of these guys who are, and then their sons, and you can just see their look. They're just angry in general. They're like, I can't wait to go on mission again, someplace else downrange. And yeah, anyways.
I always qualify anytime I talk about child psychology when I'm talking to you. You're in the thick of it. But accept no substitute. Young people will figure out what is antithetical to their parents and then go that direction.
I don't even. It's crazy. More than even a sixth sense, they absolutely do what you're saying. But it's almost genomic. Like Ronan started doing the opposite of what I wanted before he could even perceive what I wanted or didn't want. Yep. It was just absolutely natural with him. It's just like, oh yeah, and it's hilarious. And then I'll find out like, oh, Ronan, Sarah was just like Ronan. Like when I talk to her mother, she's just like, oh, Sarah and Ronan are just identical twins, and I'm just like, oh, so this is Sarah's fault. She did this to you guys, and now I'm getting the brunt of this. No, but
if you pick a phobia that Americans love to practice, could be homophobia, could be racism, right? If you're transphobic, I can bet money on how kids are going to turn out in that family because they're going to pick up on it and they're going to be like, oh, this will piss off my parent.
Yeah.
Insert name here.
Yes. If there's the classic story of the white woman who comes from a racist family bringing home her black boyfriend or Mexican boyfriend or whoever to elicit an immediate response, and depending on how much the parent really pissed that kid off as a child, she might marry that person purely no, it won't be out of spite, but I'm just saying it's funny. You absolutely, these biases or these idioms that the household carries or whatever. I don't even know what you'd call them. The kids are going to identify that shit and just go for it.
I was with a friend of mine who I met at the dance studio, and I was having Thanksgiving with her family because I look for other families to hang out with rather than my own, because
totally.
Their toxic internal system doesn't affect me.
Yeah, it's great. You're just a bystander, right? Like you don't even have to be in on the argument that's been going on for like 20 years within the family, right? You're like, oh yeah, just there might be somebody who leans over and they're like, so the deal is this, and you get to chuckle along, right?
I'm an anthropologist and I just go around studying American families. I can't think of the quote because I've heard the quote but never read the book, but it's like all families are the same in how they're bad and they're different in the way that they're good or something like that. That's a classic literature thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to look it up.
Uh-oh.
And so I was dining with them, and a friend of mine, her daughter is 15, and so my friend says, hey, let's go around the table and talk about what we're thankful for.
Oh, good. A classic.
She said, I'll start. And when it got to her daughter, so my friend, she's in the Christian faith. She, goes to church when she can. Like, this is the thing this is her value system. And I just, as an anthropologist, I'm watching this. And so how does this 15-year-old girl piss her mom off? Lean heavily into paganism, right? Just take the religion car and just grab the wheel and just steer right off into,
I'm thankful to our Lord and Savior Satan.
This case it was, Norse mythology, and I'm just I can tell Ed her mom doesn't know Norse mythology. She just knows something's up.
Oh, yeah. Her mom sense is going on. So she's like, I'm thankful to the pagan lord. As Voots,
Yeah,
starts saying
exactly.
some like Nordic names of gods and shit.
Yeah, I'm like it just there's just no you're not going to raise kids and not have them really push your buttons somehow. They're really going to try to figure out what it is you just can't tolerate, and then do that thing to see how it goes.
Oh, and yeah,
Right.
it's so easy in our household because I have a terrible poker face and Sarah has a terrible poker face for stuff that annoys or we don't
Yeah.
like. Immediately, I'm like, I make a noise. I'm like, like, and so like right off the bat, it's like, oh, they just found another thing.
Yep.
Um, Kian, he just knows he should be jumping off of everything and
Right.
that will really get me going because I don't want him to hurt himself. But so he just, of course, wants to jump off of everything, and he's trying to copy Ronan, who can jump
Yeah.
off of pretty much everything in the house now and get
Absolutely.
hurt less at least, or he's gonna figure it out. Yeah. So, oh man, yes, it's bad because a terrible poker face when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like, yeah. Um, they read us like a book. Yeah, and they're always watching and listening. The funny thing is, children, they act like they're not listening, but they're absorbing everything that's
Oh
being
yeah.
said. So you can't even
Oh
like
yeah.
talk shit in the kitchen to your wife about one of them, annoying you without them coming in like later and regurgitating that, and you're like, I didn't think they heard
Yeah.
that. You're like, dang it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah,
Anyways.
we've just laid out the entire premise for me being childless and going to my grave that way. I
Oh,
would be so, I would be so antagonized by everything that they did.
that's
It's just
funny.
adorable when it's somebody else's kids doing it, but if it's to me, no way.
So this is funny because we're talking about having kids, not having kids right
Yeah.
now. There's been a weird push, and I've seen multiple YouTube documentaries and articles about this
Mhm.
recently. Um, Elon Musk, the vice president or whatever, is they're all talking
Prime
about,
Minister.
yeah, the Prime Minister Musk. They're all talking about like the replacement theory, right? These stupid replacement theories, right? One of them is basically a lot of them are racist. Like, usually it's like, what are we gonna do? The population in the world is collapsing, and you're like, aren't there like 1.4 billion Indians and like 1.2 billion Chinese and like
Yep.
I don't know. Nigeria has like what 800 million people already. They're having a boom. Like,
Mhm.
what are you talking about? Like, the population has only increased. So, like, I keep hearing this though, and
Mhm.
Kurgstad did an episode on Korea, how South Korea won't exist basically as we know it in 2060 or something. And I do know the replacement numbers are really low, like zero point 0.7 or something like that. But I just feel like demographics don't, and this is usually my issue with Peter Zion, so we might be treading on old ground here, but demographics, I don't feel like follow linear trends necessarily. Like there's a lot of things that go into demographic, like booms basically and declines. Um, so yeah, what are your thoughts on this argument here, Richard?
I love talking about this way too much. I have no idea what I'm even talking about, but I love looking at the plots. So right now I have a demographic plot in front of me. I will look this up. I'm not looking up a quote from a Russian novel, but I will look
Yeah,
this up.
I like it.
Uh, so we're talking about demographics, which is it is the characterization of populations in a given We'll
State.
just do within national boundaries. Yeah,
Yeah.
given state. So within national boundaries, it doesn't have to be um we don't have to do accounting for ethnicities, although if you do that, it kind of gets interesting to see which ethnicities do have the stronger replacement rate, stronger, excuse me, what's the word I want? Not replacement, no, stronger birth rates. That's the word I wanted.
Yeah.
Because some ethnic groups have a um, faith system that they adhere to closely, and then that affects their birth rates. So oftentimes
Yeah,
a
a
demographic
lot of different faiths are there. I was thinking of like Ashkenazi Jews, evangelical and Baptist Christians, Mormons, for the love of God, in the Christian faith, dang,
Mhm.
and then Islam, hard on the if you're fat, you're practicing, you should be having lots of children. Yeah, Sikhs, Sikhs, tons of kids. They're big
Yeah.
into that religion. They're popping kids out. I'm in like the Mecca. Well, I don't know what the Sikh Mecca would be called, but I'm there right now in the Bay Area. So we'll just call it Little Punjabi. But yeah.
So a demographic plot will it will be it's a bar graph. It's usually laid sideways, so the bars go this way,
Mm-hmm.
sideways on the plot, and one side is going to represent men, and one side is going to represent women or males and females,
Yeah, like blue and
and then
do they do blue and red
yeah,
basically or something?
blue and red usually,
Yeah.
and then yeah, they're separate colors, so you can kind of see what's going on there. So going sideways on the x-axis is going to be population in thousands, right? Sometimes it's millions, but it's going to be population numbers. And then the x-axis, the vertical axis, is going to be age. So at the bottom you have younger people, at the top you have older people. So when you look at a demographic plot for an agrarian civilization, we would expect to see really long bars on the bottom representing the youngest people, babies, and we would expect to see a gentle slope going up to a point where the oldest people are represented, people in their centenarians or people in their 80s or so. And so that's your classic, your so-called healthy demographic plot, which is to say that the birth rate is high enough to tolerate attrition, because we would expect there to be an attrition rate in the populations. And
Mm-hmm.
then as the pyramid goes up in age, you would expect to see attrition to have this gradual effect and then really begin to come into play as people get to about 50, age 50, and then on. So that's going to be an agrarian civilization. It's going to be pre-modern in a lot of ways. So um, there
Not
won't really
industrialized
be,
basically is
yeah, they're
yeah.
going to be growing their crops, subsistence farming. There won't be vaccines for rotavirus. That's a thing that's on my mind right now. I can come back to that in a minute. But you would expect that the attrition rate to be pretty high between 0 and like 5 years old, and then there's going to be an attrition rate for people between 16 and 25 because maybe there's some type of brinksmanship or bellicose action going on. So those people are going to be called up for military duty. And then there's going to be that attrition rate after age 55. So
Yeah.
typical plot is going to be triangular shaped. What we've been noticing and what you described as you introduced this idea is that we're beginning to see this really wild inversion of that triangle shape, such that now what we're seeing in
It's like a
developed
top.
nations, it's wider in the middle,
Yeah, like a top.
and
You'd think of a spinning
yeah,
top where the bottom is very is a little
yeah.
bit more pointy, narrow. Yeah.
So I'm looking at a U.S. population by gender plot. Um, I'd have to go to the website here because it's marked as 2010, so this might be 15 years out of date. But the way that it looks is that there's this wide band of Americans in the 30 to 34 age group, and then it just declines, and then it bulges out again for people in their late teens, and then it declines again, and then it kind of recovers, but its trend is narrowing.
Yeah.
It kind of recovers for people 0 to 4, but it after that 30 to 34 widest part of the plot, it gets narrower as it goes up the y-axis, and it gets narrow as it goes down the y-axis. If you look at this, you can make a bunch of interpretations about what's going on in that civilization. There's another plot I'm looking at that says United States 2020, same story. There's two there's two interesting bulges in this plot because it actually covers a different period of time. And what it's saying is that there's a bulge between 60 and 65.
Okay.
Those are your boomers.
The earliest boomers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The youngest of the baby boomers.
And there's kind of a cut there, which is my generation. And then it widens out again for people in your age group. Yep. There you go. And then after that, it just drops off precipitously. So it falls by many millions of people in both genders as it goes to 0 on the y-axis. So when we think about demographics and you look at these plots, it tells the story that people aren't having babies,
mm-hmm.
and families are smaller in a generalized way for a national boundary, for some national boundary. It does tell you what the overall population number is, but the more important information, what these plots are telling us more importantly, is that something is happening that is happening between the widest point of the plot, where men and women have the most population, and the bottom of the plot, where it would appear the youngest people seem to be the lowest population, or declining population.
So,
so go ahead.
I was going to say, so let me take a stab. Number one, wealth inequality. So signs show that as things become more and more expensive, the prospect of owning a house is harder and harder. The idea that people can settle down and have kids becomes farther and farther far away in terms of goals or things you can actually achieve. So that would be one. Two, people are having kids later. C, reason A, wealth inequality. So like, maybe Gen X stayed more traditionally. They had kids in their 20s into their 30s. Whereas the millennials, not many of us have very many kids in our 20s, I would say. And the bulk of us have been having our kids in our 30s, which is a lot later. Also, science has progressed. We've realized that I think we're still calling geriatric pregnancies for anyone in their 30s. It's just weird though. Women can definitely have kids in their freaking 30s, and it looks like more and more so probably in their 40s, at least till 45. And some into their 50s. Celebrities I know have been doing this, but as medical science has progressed and we've decided that, you're not an old hag in your 30s, which is kind of an insane idea to begin with. So that's got to go be something too, as well. We're a service-based economy now. We're not an industrial economy. The idea that you need all these workers for like factories and stuff. I mean, this current administration sure would like that to be a thing. So I don't know. So I'd say those are some reasons. Also, medical science has advanced a lot. The idea, like the baby boomer generation was like, I think the last generation where people hadn't realized that kids weren't dying like they were before. And so they, and also we had like an economic boom and all of that stuff kind of propelled into the war being over. So lots of kids were being made. But that's kind of, all of that plus baby mortality rate had like tanked in the 1930s and 40s, right? Like we had really made a lot of advances in vaccines, which is how I'll segue into the rotavirus vaccine, which is one of the most brilliant vaccines ever made. And I'm guessing we're going to talk about RFK Jr.'s like zero target, his targeting of that freaking virus is what I'm guessing Richard's going to bring up.
Yeah, I was listening to revisionist history, and I can tolerate a few hours of that a week, and then I have to move on to something else.
Is that Malcolm
Yeah,
Gladwell?
I do like Malcolm Gladwell's work, but he uh, listening to a Malcolm Gladwell book is not unlike a rodeo, not unlike riding a rodeo bull. You know, you're there for kind of a short amount of time, but you do a lot of you know, you get faked a lot of times.
You
You're
bound
at the end of the book, and you go, "What do I take away from this?" I've been thrown off at the end, and I'm not sure what to take away from this. So you know, and if I'm not going to do Malcolm Gladwell's entire bibliography here, but if you look up Malcolm Gladwell as an author on the internet, you can find he's the author of many books, and they all have interesting premises, and you know he has a journalistic approach to his writing and so forth. And so I was listening to one of his recent uh, programs on the internet. What do they call them? Podcasts? What do the kids call these
Podcast,
these
yes.
days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the thing we're doing right now. It's one of these. You know what? You sounded just like R.M. Brown. Do you listen to R.M. Brown? Because that content is gold. But he would be like, what is this thing? What are we reading here? What do we call this thing? Huh? Oh, yeah, it's a podcast. Anyways, yeah. So
For the audience, I'm not going to talk about the program that we're using to record this, but I struggle with it. Every time I open it up, it's something new about it, and I shake my fist at a cloud, and you know, talk about how I wore an onion on my belt because it was a style at the time. And Nichols had bumblebees on them, with two bees for a dime, they'd say. um, anyway, so Malcolm Gladwell's talking about having read RFK's book. So um, I'd like to acknowledge. So we're having our conversation today on 420. Am I right?
that's right.
Blaze those trees, everybody. He is risen, and this is 420 of 2025. And so there's a there has been a change in administration in the U.S. in the United States, and that administration came with a lot of changes that are so radical that the the country is bewildered by every one of these changes. Not
The
least
country's in
because
stun lock right now. It literally is like stun locked, basically. Like no one, it's just, it's this, yeah. Anyways, just
there are any number of people who will talk about the executive and the executive decisions in descriptive negative ways. And what often happens is that those are so extreme that we forget some of the other interesting ways that this administration has chosen cabinet members and department heads that also leaves us bewildered.
if I
Go
may,
ahead.
I just to paint some color, it's this weird thing. I would say it's all a part of a tactic. You know, if you shotgun all this information at us, you never know what the magician's doing behind the scenes, right? But in this case, every single person from the cabinet is a competing magician. And of course,
Right.
the president's the biggest of the magicians, and his prime minister, they're very
Yep.
big magicians, so they do suck up a lot of oxygen in the room. But there's this weird rotation that's constantly happening. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen, where just imagine every character gets to show you something while they're doing it. The other ones are all doing shit behind the curtain. And it's this weird merry-go-round. I mean, because we're in the circus, and this is a magician
Yeah.
circus. And they're all cheap magicians too, which is funny. They're only hoodwinking like 40% of the country, who's just kind of like, yeah, this is great. I'm loving it, just like they would, every WWE special, just like this is real
Yeah.
drama. So, anyways, that's to add some color to
Yeah.
what you're, you know,
Yeah.
saying
Totally.
because I'm right there with you.
And so I'm listening to Malcolm Gladwell's presentation on this topic, and he says, "All right, so I'm reading this guy's book. This is our director of Health and Human Services. This is a
He's a
member
Kennedy.
of the Kennedy family. By the way, the Kennedy family is like one of those not royalty. What's the word I'm looking for? A dynasty. There we go. They're one of
Yeah,
those dynastic families in American politics. And the author, Robert F. Kennedy, really goes on the warpath to talk about this um, vaccine that's given to children called Rototech. And I went to the Rototech website. I have it before me, and I will not read every bit of text on the Rototech website. But they say right up front, what is rotavirus? Rotavirus is a common virus that is easy to catch. It infects the stomach and intestines, causing symptoms like diarrhea and vomiting. In the pre vaccine era, nearly all children were affected by rotavirus by age 5. So when we talk about demographics and we're talking about the behavior in those demographics and how they change a little bit. So the demographic map plot I have in front of me now is no longer the triangle. It's a bar graph, and it's taking 2015 as the starting point and then going back to 1915. And so 2015 to 1999, that's a generation. 99 to 81, that's a generation. 81 to 65, right? I could just keep
yeah.
going. So I'm in the 81 to 65 generation. That's Gen X. And the plot, the plot for the bar graph height is the number of millions of people in that generation. And so the millennial generation, according to this plot, this is as of December 2015, your generation is 79.4 million people.
Heyo.
Gen X is 65 million people. Baby boomers are 75 million people. So what you see is these kind of high points between boomers and millennials, and then there's like this dip in population for Gen X. But then if you go from 65 to 46, that plot just drops off precipitously. And it goes to silent generation and greatest gen. So the silent generation are people that we would say maybe on average are going to be the parents of Gen Xers, silent
Nancy
gen.
Pelosi, Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell. Any celebrities I can think of in that age range? Oh, Harrison Ford, Helen Mirren. Helen Mirren might be an old baby boomer, but yeah. Anyways,
They would have been born in the 30s, and then the greatest gen was born in the late teens, so 1928 to 1915 in this bracket. Now, depending on who you talk to, you can have a really heated argument about where these generations start and stop.
yes,
There'll be people that tell you that I'm a millennial, and so I don't really have a problem with that. But most of the generation plots that I see put my age or my date of birth in the Gen X plot,
oh, totally.
and
Yeah,
and you could see how that would be argue. You could have arguments about the start and stop of boomers, the start and stop of everybody here. Um, what you said earlier, I know it sounds like I'm going all over the place, but what you observed earlier was that birth attrition changed after World War II.
yeah,
Birth attrition changed. It's not necessarily that we just went from having small families to having large families, because on the plot I'm looking at here, that's a ramp. It goes up
yeah.
precipitously. But starting in 1946, we saw this total change in population growth, and it just went up from there. That's our baby boom. And if you go back in the annals of history, you can see these really interesting emergence of a vaccine for this type of malady that affects only babies and children, and
Mm-hmm.
a vaccine for this malady that only affects babies and children. The next thing
Exactly.
you know, you have you have this formulation of a couple of things that have always created an attrition rate for babies. One, malnourishment.
Mm-hmm.
Two,
Dirty
taking predators.
doctors. Oh yeah.
So we have nourishment, predation. Three, disease.
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet that if I called upon you to do so, you would be able to articulate some of the vaccines that were given to your kids when they were babies and as they make toddler and so forth.
It it
You kind
goes up. It's for years. It's for years, right? The first 2 years, it's a lot, and then it slows down. 4 years
yeah
less. Eight, 6, 8. It's basically on an even time scale for the most part after one.
yeah
Yeah,
and these are vaccines from measles, mumps, and rubella. So those sound like Victorian diseases that would be in the background story of an American Girl doll.
I'll grab my tea and say measles seems to be making a way back into the limelight, though.
We've got different poxes. We've got, but really one of the um not because it of course the thought of talking about it is pretty gross. Although if you're a parent, from child excrement, rotavirus causes diarrhea and vomiting, which dehydrates the human
Very dangerous.
body,
It's super
and it goes
dangerous.
on. Oh my god. Yes, it's unbelievably dangerous, and it accounts for, if you look globally, it accounts for some of the highest attrition of small people
Yeah,
under the age of 5.
I mean, none of this it doesn't make any sense. You and I have talked at length about the gut specifically, how complex this system
Yeah.
is, how fundamental it is to your health, maybe even psychologically. Right? It might be the where psychic damage is kept in our physiologic. We've talked about that
Yeah.
stuff. So imagine any third world country where you have this disease and you have limited food supply, right? And you're under poverty too. Limited clean water supply in different countries. So absolutely, the mortality rates for here, it makes it's not a surprise at all um, that this would be a big issue and that this would affect the mortality rate of infants. So yeah, going back to the demography, these are some of the things. That's why I wonder if it's such a concern that we're not, necessarily having kids at the rate that we were, because first off, many more of them are surviving than
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
survive. You needed to have a bunch of extras pre World War II, basically, is the idea. You needed to have extras. You needed more for the type of work that was being done, which we go back to your comment about agrarian societies. Um,
Yeah.
the farm needed labor, and you could feed the labor on the farm enough until they were like
Mhm.
14 or 15, and you could kick them out if you needed to. And that's what Americans did all the time. Um, so
Oftentimes, farming families. This sounds pretty quaint, but farming families have this uh, spinsters and bachelors kind of situation going on in a lot of them. If the attrition rate wasn't too hard on certain farming families, you saw that there were men and women that never married off and started their own families. They lived in the farmhouse with mom and dad. They stayed there, and sometimes they did start a family, but they might stay in that same farmhouse anyway. And you I'm describing that thing that's, I think it's interesting. I don't know if I really have a comment pro con on this, except that it is the way that our not necessarily our civilization, our human history comes from, which is it is unusual for people to live alone and to raise families in a model similar to what you're even doing. You just your in-laws are very close to you there, so this is great. But historically, you would have lived in the same domicile with them.
Yeah, I mean, and especially if we weren't in America. I mean, like up in the the U.S. has adopted like living away from the family, for
Mm-hmm.
a couple generations now, at least. I would
Mm-hmm.
say over a century, probably.
Yeah.
When the breakdown of the farm, and where people started to
Yeah.
move to the city, is essentially where we saw the breakdown of that generational domicile
Mm-hmm.
living space, to the point where this country specifically stigmatized it in a lot of ways. Like the idea that
Yeah.
you were going to stay in the house past 18 was
Yeah.
almost criminal, right? Like and I know many kids, including myself, who anytime you wanted to live in your house with your folks beyond 18, financial restitution was a requirement, basically. And I know
Right.
that is very common to this day, which is just absolutely absurd, I have to say, on its face. Like
Yeah.
the idea that I'm going to send my kids off to college or something, and like maybe if they want to live with me, that would be even better. Um, where I'm going to flip the bill on a dorm room when I can have them live at my own house, it's ridiculous right off the bat. Like
Yeah.
it's this weird thing. Yeah, this the American idea that you never want to be around your family. I think this is maybe capitalism has progressed this as a propaganda through all of our media sources. There are countless rom-coms where the husband is seemingly annoyed with the wife off right off the bat. He's a buffoon, of course,
Right.
and sex is off the table because, of course, they're a couple that's been married for 10 years, and that's a
Yeah.
ridiculous idea. It paints this picture that American couples shouldn't be happy. It's actually a joke if they are. Um, and their kids, you don't want to be around them, and everyone's waiting for everyone else to be out of the house. That is this weird, like, kind of cultural norm in our country, uh, which isn't healthy. Like it's incredibly unhealthy.
Well, I mean, when you talk about so you and I are not going to solve the demographics problem in this conversation today, but when we talk about what might be happening, so even though our director of health and human services has unfortunate opinions about vaccinations, that isn't that is not having the negative impact on total population that the advent of vaccinations had on population, right? So
Yeah,
it was a big population jump when we removed all the causes of attrition, and vaccinations being one of them. We removed that attrition of disease.
yeah,
So we're not at a point yet where things have fallen apart enough for us to revert back to the 1930s and 1920s era of our country where the population is increasing, but it's the silent generation was only 28 million people, and the greatest generation was 3.79 million people. These are tiny generations compared to even Gen X.
yeah,
So we're we're talking about we think about okay, so if people are if our demographic plots, excuse me, if our demographic plots show this drop off in fertility rates, well then we ask the question, well, why? What's happening? But it's not attrition. It's not people dying of disease and privation and starvation and all of these other things that used to cause our population to stay in check. I think that what we're talking about here is the introduction of a couple of different forces that are kind of crushing young people in between them. Like there, it's not a
yeah,
force that can move people one way or the other. It is contraction of forces on them.
yeah,
And one of them, as you articulated early on, is that the cost of living is redirecting people to uh, not in that way that we were doing before, where we would have multiple generations living in one household, because it had utility for everyone. It's because people can't afford to live on their own.
Yeah.
The cost of housing is so extraordinarily high for young people to try to integrate into their budgets, that it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
This is a problem that I had when I was a teen. So, not the housing so much, although that was solved by going into the military.
Check.
It was the car. So, I lived in a part of the state that's rural enough that if I wanted to drive a car to school or drive a car to go to a job, which is a thing that people my generation just did, if they were living in urban areas, Gen Xers got their car as soon as they could and got the hell out of the house, and were kind of living independently, many of us as early as 16. We just we had a force behind us to get away from our parents.
Yeah.
And that's
Not to
what it was with
mention,
me.
I was I was just gonna say, as a cusper millennial, I was, that was the same mentality for us. The force was me wanting to get out of the house, and also the boot trying to kick while I ran ahead of it, right before it could touch my butt. It was basically yeah. Anyways,
But the problem was, and I was doing, I'm talking about my 17-year-old brain doing this math,
yeah.
so it's not perfect. But the problem is that a car was going to be some number of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
and that some number of dollars was only three figures. It was going to be hundreds of dollars, not thousands.
Sure.
Insurance was going to be some number of dollars,
Double
and
digits at
gas,
the time. You could double
yep, double
digits.
digits at the time, and gas was going to be some number of dollars for this car.
Less than a
Altogether,
dollar.
yep, the monthly costs to keep a car that I would drive to a job that would pay me under $10 an hour meant that I would be working solely to support having the car. The calculus on this said, don't bother getting a car. It's not worth the trouble to just get a job to pay for the car. When I
Yeah.
lived in a rural place, I couldn't walk to a job. I couldn't ride a bike to a job. I had to have driven a car to go anywhere where there was employment for me. Now, this is the early 1990s, so the types of things that a young person could do for work varied. I mean, I could work for other landowners around where I lived if I wanted to, and I did sometimes. But that wasn't regular work. That was piecemeal work. That was somebody need a young person to dig a hole or mow a lawn.
Yeah.
So
Buck hay during
what I
the summer, or
totally,
there's a seasonal work. That kind of work was always good. Like you could do combine work at 14, 12 even, I think we could get away with. Bucking hay, that kind of stuff. Some field work that, Mexicans ended up taking over a lot of that work. But yeah.
so when we talk about this curious generational shrinking, this population that seems to be smaller. So Gen Z in this plot that's in front of me is 73.6 million. So there's still a larger population than Gen X, but they represent a population of people who are declining in number. And it's a trend line. There is a trend to it. The people born in 1999, that's a larger population year than the people born in 2015.
So,
And
well, I was going to say, is it bad though? Or was the baby boomer population just too big? Like,
was it
what?
aberrant?
Yeah, I mean, was the baby that was the aberration, and the fact that our economy is based on a larger supply pool and supply demand
Yeah.
pool, we'll call it, which is the worker,
Mm-hmm.
now is going away. So this abhorrent thing has moved its way through our economy, and now it's finally arrived at D-Day, which is they're in the area where they no longer produce, but they will drain from the economy, and their capital that they have won't go into investment, which it hasn't been anyways right now. Let's be real. this economy is barely a capitalist one anymore, as far as capital investment goes. That's a whole other episode we can talk about later. But yeah, they've moved their way through till now, and they're dying, and we don't have enough people to prop them up. Is the idea? This is
Right.
the D-Day scenario for me, and I guess this is where I'll put a pin in the episode for my final thoughts on it. I don't think this is that big of a deal. I really don't. I see us settling back to a population, a demographic situation where we do have maybe 1.5 to 2 kids per, whatever. We're close to replacement, but maybe we're not there. I think the wealth inequality is a thing that might solve that, of course, if we started taxing the rich what we needed to, and we dispersed that wealth more evenly. You'd probably see some more kids. You'd probably see couples having kids a little bit earlier. We didn't even get to the idea of feminism and the women being required to be in the workforce, and the ridiculous idea that what are they not going to be in the workforce and become professionals in the workforce anymore until they find somebody to marry, and then they have to decide whether or not they want to have kids or not. We didn't get to talk about any of that on this episode, but I think that's a missing element. So I just wanted to put an asterisk next to our conversation about demographics, because we didn't talk about
Yeah.
agency existing in the world that we live in, and the requirement of women to have jobs and be contributing, to support themselves essentially. Yeah. So, yeah.
And we could, if we had more time to get into that, the idea that our civilization punishes them for doing it. If a woman has a family, she would had to have positioned herself in her career in such a way that she can take time away from it and not be penalized when she comes back to that career. But that's exactly what happens to them. So
Yeah.
the answer is right in front of us. It's that our, some people call it late stage capitalism, makes it has what you call perverse incentives. We are perversely incentivized to have families
Late
or
stage,
not have
yeah. And
families.
late stage capitalism, I mean, it's always late stage, right? Because it's the latest stage of capitalism right now, by definition.
Mm-hmm.
But you're absolutely right. Almost everything about this new economic structure we've kind of gone into, including having oligarchs
Mm-hmm.
take over into our government essentially and ruin
Right.
democracy as we know it. These are all natural conclusions of late stage capitalism, where every incentive is perverse. Like the idea that CEOs are hired to, they're not hired to like grow the company. They're there to take as much value as they can from it, extract as much value as they can from it for their shareholders, take a huge check for doing it, because it usually means firing and reducing the efficiency of the company somehow now. Yeah, we've gone into these, where CEOs aren't paid even in cash. It's all stock, because that's wealth. It's untaxable wealth. Everything is about your shares and your stocks now. You can even buy other companies with stocks now and never have to realize gains. So yeah, the economy has morphed into these weird perverse incentives where people like you and me trying to earn cash, it's laughable, right? So let alone have children. Yeah. So yeah, I've had a really enjoyable conversation with you, Richard, about demography and everything in between. So with that, maybe we call it.
There's so much more to say on this, and perhaps we'll convene later and want to get into the other dynamics of what's happening with demographics. But
Yeah.
I find it incredibly interesting, and I'm I'm one of the people who's part of the problem, or maybe I'm representing all of the. I'm in one person. I can represent several of the forces that make it harder to choose to be a parent these days.
Yeah, I would say you represent an archetype that I very
Mm-hmm.
could have easily slid into. The if I would have been more self-aware, potentially, I would have potentially like been a lot more hesitant to start a family based on my past, similar to you. Um, and yeah, so I think, yeah, sometimes it's okay to represent the avatar of a couple confluent factors, one of being indentured servitude as a child. So,
All right. Well, I'm with you. Let's call it. And it's been a thin slice of having to talk to you today.
absolutely, man.
Time.
See you next time.